are some of Iran's most pressing security interests? Number one, Iran is very eager to be living in a peaceful neighborhood. Iran has a great ability to stabilize Iraq. Iran probably can do more to stabilize Iraq than any other country in the world, including the United States. In fact, Iran could be our ticket out of Iraq. Our big fear in withdrawing from Iraq is that as soon as we withdraw, the place will explode again in some new terrible wave of violence like we had a few years ago. If Iran wants to, Iran can probably prevent that from happening. Some kind of global accord where we can draw Iran in would tremendously improve our situation in Iraq. The same thing is probably true in Afghanistan. Iraq is one place where Iran has great influence, but on the other side of Iran sits Afghanistan. A lot of Afghanistan actually used to be part of Iran up until Iran lost a couple of wars in the 19th century. Iran is very deeply rooted in what's now Afghanistan. It has a great ability to influence the course of events there. If given the incentive of a global agreement, Iran can be a partner for us in Afghanistan, as it was in the period right after September 11th, when we were working closely with Iran on the Afghanistan project. Iran is also the militant enemy of radical groups like Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, whose leaders want to kill every Shia. Iran is very interested in the free flow of energy from the Persian Gulf out into the outside world. Iran's own energy infrastructure is in total collapse and needs huge investment. American companies are perfectly placed to provide that. So when you put aside the rhetoric and the emotion, you see that over the long run, actually Iran is not only not fated to be our enemy forever, but in fact the United States and Iran have a great deal in common over the future. I would love to see the United States approach Iran with the offer to negotiate all issues, not just the nuclear issue. I don't think it's ever going to work for us to try to pursue an agreement only on the one issue we care about. But if we open up the agenda, I think we have more possibilities. Now, given what we know about this regime in Iraq, particularly how it brutally crushed the democratic protests last year, and how it has behaved in the year since then, and the kinds of statements that the president of Iran likes to make in public, is this a good time for the U.S. to be approaching Iran with an offer of negotiation? Probably not. But there's never going to be a good time. This crisis is intensifying. This is not like some frozen conflict like Karabakh or Cyprus, where we'd all like to solve it, but if it doesn't get solved this year or next year, nothing really terrible is going to happen. That's not what's happening in the Middle East. This crisis is intensifying. Looming threats to the West are growing in the Middle East. It's getting more and more threatening to the world. And meanwhile, of course, the centrifuges are spinning in Iran, and Iran is getting more and more advanced on its nuclear program. So this is not something we can turn away from. The democratic movement in Iran is in a very difficult position. It doesn't have any good options. The best of the bad options for the democratic movement is if the regime is somehow lured out of its isolation, its paranoia, and reassured and calmed down a little. I've read some comments recently here in Washington about how the U.S. ought to stand out very publicly and say, we support the Iranian reform movement, we'll do anything for it, we'll give them any support they want. This is a terrible idea. Anybody that knows about Iran understands that deep-seated in the Iranian psyche is the sense that foreigners are always interfering in our country and preventing us from developing. If we publicly embraced and encouraged the democratic movement in Iran, we totally delegitimize that movement. And that's why the leaders of that movement are not asking us to do that. They're not asking for our public support. This is something they're going to do themselves. And that's the only way it will ever be a legitimate movement. So I see over the long run, Iran and Turkey as countries we ought to cultivate as our partners. Whether this can happen overnight, I'm not so sure. I think we ought to try a new approach to Turkey and patch up what's happened just in these last weeks. I think it's important for Turkey and the United States also to closer align their views, not just about Iran, but also about Israel. I think it would be nice for the United States to say to Turkey, you know, maybe you're right about Iran. Maybe we've been too confrontational, and maybe there really is a possibility for some kind of a meeting of the minds between the U.S. And Iran. So maybe we will take your advice, and we're going to try a really sincere new offer to Iran, which is based on conciliation and a sincere desire for compromise. But while we're accepting your advice on this, how about following the same advice as it regards Israel? Don't be so confrontational. Ratchet down the rhetoric. See if we can't rebuild that relationship. The Turkey-Israel relationship is very, very important for the future of Middle East peace. It's very important that Israel not feel totally isolated. Israel at some point is going to need a bridge out of its isolation. Turkey can be that bridge. But Turkey should not be adopting some of the bad habits of American foreign policy. In American foreign policy, we often act emotionally. We act for short-term benefit without thinking about what's going to happen in the long run. And we're too eager for confrontation. Turkey is telling us not to be like that, but in a sense, Turkey is acting that way with Israel. I think Turkey made its point now with Israel, with Gaza. Now is the time to ratchet down that point and try to rebuild that relationship. So I feel that the United States is still flailing around. We're caught in the quicksand of a 20th century policy. And any new ideas, any original thinking in foreign policy is treated as the germ of some terrible plague that has to be stamped out immediately before it infects the entire foreign policy process. All comments on foreign policy have to fit within a very narrow spectrum of acceptable opinions. And anybody outside those margins is stigmatized as some kind of a wacko who needs to be kept outside the room whenever serious discussions of it. You know, I read a great line once from Dorothy Parker when she was commenting on the acting style of Katharine Hepburn. She said that Katharine Hepburn runs the gamut of emotion from A to B. That's a little bit like our foreign policy. We're so circumscribed in a very narrow spectrum. I'd like to see us jump outside that, try to reconceive the Middle East and America's role in it. I do think this is going to require a reset, as I say in the title of my book, and not just of policies, but of America's attitudes and approach. I do think, however, that although things look very bleak in the Middle East, that's only because we're caught in this paradigm of the past. If we look at things in a new way, open up our mind, there are new opportunities for us there. But we're not going to find those opportunities by following the policies of the past. They manifestly haven't worked, but yet we're still trying to pursue them. So I guess my final line to the American foreign policymakers who are dealing with the Middle East would be a great quote from Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet, who actually is buried in what's now Turkey. So he's the perfect person to end with. He said something that I'd like to ask to American policymakers. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this really provocative talk. I'd like to start with one question and then I'll open up for questions from the audience. You spent quite a lot of time in the book on history, which is refreshing for policymakers as well. In fact, you spent half of the book before you start talking about the process and context. If you were to go back to Canada a little bit and describe how the relationship between Turkey and the United States during the Cold War is defined. What were the main issues and the type of relationship that the two countries have? Because today, Turkey seems to say that things have changed. We now have a new geopolitical context. So accordingly, we have to watch out for our own interests. So what has really changed?